All right, here's a continuation of our workspace. I'd like to start to look at um, some of the different panels that we have here. We finished off and I was talking about the properties panel and how it's a dynamic panel. So as you can see, when I click the stage, right, so I click the stage area and you'll see that the properties changed to document properties, which is essentially the publish settings, which we don't really worry too much about. I tend to leave them on the default setting, so I can close that. These are essentially the most important properties here for the document. 1920 by 1080, which is full HD. I don't have any of these checked, and just the frame rate set to 24. That's typically what we do. The SWF history, I don't worry about that. And accessibility, that's kind of later. A lot of this accessibility stuff has to do with, making interactive content, and we don't use that feature here in this class. We really just focus on the animation side of things, and we don't publish our movies as SWF files to put up on the web. We really just publish as video files that we can either send to our video editing application or put directly up on like YouTube, for instance. So that's really it as far as the properties panel is concerned. Now you'll see there's a few other panels embedded under here. Okay, we have our color picker. And so here is where you can kind of create custom colors on the fly, either by messing with the RGB and the alpha as well, which is the transparency. You can choose solid colors, linear gradients, radial gradients, bitmap fills. We'll touch upon this later on when we start getting into importing graphics. It's really super cool. You have your fill color and you have your stroke color. You can also find your fill and your stroke color over here in the toolbar as well. It's really handy. I tend to typically go through here for my color. So I don't use my color palette often, except in bigger projects. When you're doing larger animations, you ought to create color swatches. These are the default swatches, but you can actually import swatches and create custom color swatches and custom color palettes. And you'll do that with larger projects. Once you start getting into animation, those are some of the details that you'll have to really, really dive down into is what are my colors? Anyway, but that's that. Close it here. Then there's our swatches right underneath. Below that is our align panel. I'll show you how to use this later on. Essentially, it's the same as the align panel in Illustrator and Photoshop and other Adobe products. It's a way to make sure things are square necessarily. Okay. Info panel. The info panel is, again, I don't tend to use it too much. I used it more when I was doing game design using Adobe Animate, but because we're not doing interactive stuff, then we don't need to know exactly all of these details. Okay. Transform panel, again, I really don't use this very much. We tend to do it on the fly. So the library, you're going to use the library a lot. It's something that eventually where you're going to keep all your assets. When you create body parts for characters or background pieces or props or environmental elements, you're going to turn them all into library items, and those are simply called symbols. And you're going to create symbols for a lot of different things, and I'll show you that when we talk about starting to create characters, and when we're doing drawings, we'll start making symbols, and those symbols show up in your library. And you can share libraries between projects as well, which is really cool. I'll show you how to do that later. Okay, the motion presets. We don't use the motion presets here in the class, in this very first class, because it's more of an advanced feature. I want you to learn how to create the motion yourself rather than using sort of like built-in presets that the software has. So don't worry too much about that. And last but not least, the libraries, Creative Cloud libraries. And that's where there's all kinds of stock stuff, like stock fonts, stock images, stock video, stock sound. I would rather you create your own content. You'll learn better that way. If you're creating your own audio, if you're recording your own video, or if you're taking your own photographs to use. it's just better if you get in the habit of creating your own content. That way you don't rely on libraries of stuff that you can buy and download, or you're not necessarily stealing stuff off the internet. Okay, so there you have it. There is a little bit about the workspace. Toolbar, we're going to talk about that next. Timeline, there's going to be another video just on the timeline and how that thing works. And then properties panel, you'll see in action throughout the class, because as you select things, the properties will change. Okay, thank you. See you in the next video where we'll talk about the toolbar. We'll talk about all the different options it has. It's actually, and how lines and fills work. It's really pretty cool. All right, see you next time.